So unreal. Imagine thinking he was serious. She laughed when I mentioned marriage in front of her friends. I smiled, said you're right, paid the bill, and walked out without another word. Packed everything while she was still out drinking with him. She came home to an empty apartment and a single message. Imagine thinking I'd stay. 3 days later, she was at my door crying. But before I begin, please like and subscribe to the channel. And we'd love to hear which part of the world are you joining us from. Let us know. Now let's dive into today's story. The bar smelled like lime and stale beer, with undercurrents of fried food grease that clung to the air thick enough to taste. Frank Harlan sat at the corner of a high-top table, his hands wrapped around a glass of water beaded with condensation. The ice had melted an hour ago. Around him, voices competed with the music bleeding from overhead speakers, some throwback playlist that nobody was really listening to but everyone talked over. Marina Del Rey on a Friday night meant noise. It meant crowds spilling onto patios, groups claiming tables like territory, and laughter that grew louder as the drinks kept coming. This place wasn't fancy. Worn wooden tables, mismatched chairs, a chalkboard menu with half the specials rubbed out. The kind of place where you could show up in work boots and nobody blinked. Frank wore jeans and a faded blue shirt. Clean, but nothing special. He'd come straight from a site meeting in Torrance, where he'd spent 3 hours discussing crane schedules and material delivery windows. Construction logistics. That's what he did, making sure projects had what they needed when they needed it. Early mornings, late nights, numbers and timelines, and problem solving. Tessa Moreno sat across from him, her third margarita leaving a ring of salt and lime pulp on the rim. Her dark hair caught the amber light from the Edison bulbs strung along the wall. She leaned into her friend Jenna, laughing at something on her phone screen, her voice cutting through the ambient noise like it owned the space. There were 4 of them at the table. Tessa and Jenna, who'd been friends since college. Rachel, who worked at the same boutique marketing agency as Tessa and always seemed to be taking photos for her Instagram. And Brittany, quieter than the others, nursing a gin and tonic and checking her phone every few minutes. Frank had met them all before. Multiple times. Dinners, parties, beach days. He knew their stories, their boyfriend drama, their career complaints. He'd listened more than he'd spoken, which seemed to be his default setting in groups like this. Another round? Rachel asked, already flagging down the server without waiting for an answer. Tessa pushed her glass forward. Yeah, same thing. Frank shook his head when the server glanced his way. I'm good. You're always good, Jenna said, her tone somewhere between teasing and dismissive. Live a little, Frank. He offered a small smile. I've got an early start tomorrow. Concrete pour in Gardena. 6 a.m. On a Saturday? Tessa's tone carried that familiar edge, the one that suggested she found his work schedule personally inconvenient. It's the job, he said simply. The server returned with fresh drinks. Frank watched Tessa take a long sip before she dove back into the conversation, something about a client who kept changing their mind about brand colors. The talk flowed around him, over him, occasionally brushing past him but never really landing. He'd grown used to this. These nights weren't about him. They were about Tessa's world, her friends, her rhythm. He showed up because that's what you did when you cared about someone. You made room for their life even when you didn't quite fit into it. The bar grew louder as the night wore on. More people pushed through the entrance. The music volume crept up. Someone at the table behind them started arguing about a baseball game, their voices sharp with alcohol-fueled conviction. God, weddings are such a scam, Rachel said suddenly, scrolling through her phone. My cousin just dropped 30 grand on one day. One day? Seriously, Jenna added. It's just a party where everyone judges your choices. Brittany looked up from her phone. My sister's wedding was beautiful, though. Simple. Like 80 people at a vineyard. It felt right. That's because your sister married someone stable, Rachel said. Unlike my ex, who proposed and then decided he needed to find himself in Thailand for 6 months. Laughter rippled around the table. Frank watched Tessa lean back in her chair, that smile on her face that meant she was about to say something she thought was clever. So when's Frank gonna lock it down? Jenna asked, her eyes bright with that particular curiosity people get when they're 3 drinks deep and boundaries start blurring. The question hung in the air. Frank felt the shift in attention, all eyes turning toward him like stage lights swinging to mark a performer. He didn't rush his response, didn't posture or deflect. "I've thought about marriage," he said, his voice even, measured. "With the right person." The words came out honest. Simple. He meant them. Tessa laughed. It wasn't a polite chuckle or a nervous giggle. It was loud, sharp, the kind of laugh that announced itself to nearby tables. She leaned forward, waving her hand like she was physically pushing away the absurdity of what he'd just said. "Oh my God, stop," she said, her voice cutting through the music and chatter. "You're not serious. Imagine thinking that." Her friends laughed. Some genuine, some uncomfortable. Rachel snorted into her drink. Jenna's eyes widened slightly before she joined in with a nervous titter. Only Brittany looked down at her phone, her expression carefully neutral. Nobody defended him. Nobody said, "Hey, that's harsh," or "Come on, Tess." The moment stretched. Frank felt it settle in his chest, not hot like anger, but cold. Clear. He'd been humiliated before, small cuts over the course of their relationship, little comments that stung, but never quite landed hard enough to make him react. This was different. This was public, deliberate, cruel. He nodded once. Slow. His face remained calm, almost relieved, like something had finally clicked into place. "You're right," he said quietly. Tessa was already turning back to Jenna, starting a new thread of conversation about some influencer's failed product launch. She'd already moved on. The moment was over for her. Forgotten. Another Friday night joke that would blur into the background of tequila and laughter. Frank reached for his wallet. He pulled out his credit card and caught the server's attention. "I'll take the tab," he said. The server nodded, disappeared, returned with the bill. Frank glanced at the total. $147. Every margarita, every appetizer, every drink that had loosened the words that just cut him down in front of people who should have mattered. He signed the receipt. Tip 30%. Because the server had been attentive and didn't deserve to be caught in whatever this was. Then he stood. The movement drew Tessa's attention. She looked up confused. "Where are you going?" "Home," he said. "We just got here like 2 hours ago." "You're right," Frank repeated, his voice still calm. "I misunderstood things." He turned and walked toward the exit. Behind him, he heard Jenna say something, heard Tessa's response, muffled by the noise but carrying that same dismissive energy. The night air hit him when he pushed through the door. Cooler, cleaner, the smell of salt from the nearby marina mixed with car exhaust and someone's cigarette smoke drifting from the patio area. Frank walked to his truck, a Ford F-150 he'd bought used 5 years ago and maintained meticulously. Navy blue, a few scratches from job sites, but mechanically sound. He climbed in, closed the door, and sat in the silence. No music, no radio, just the distant sounds of the city at night. Cars passing on Lincoln Boulevard. Someone's laughter from the patio. A dog barking a few blocks over. He started the engine and pulled out of the parking lot. The drive back to Culver City took 23 minutes. Frank knew because he watched the clock on the dashboard, watched the numbers change while his mind worked through what had just happened with a clarity he hadn't felt in months. He thought about the mortgage. His name. Only his name. The house he bought 3 years before he even met Tessa, when he was 31 and tired of renting. A small craftsman with good bones and a yard that needed work. He'd painted the exterior himself, replaced the plumbing, refinished the original hardwood floors. He thought about the utilities, the PG&E bill, the water, the internet, all in his name, all paid from his account. He thought about the car she drove, a Mazda CX-5 forest green. She'd wanted something reliable when her old Honda finally died, but her credit was a mess from a series of late payments and maxed-out cards. So Frank had co-signed, his name on the loan, his insurance policy covering her. And he thought about every time she called him boring in front of others, every time she'd rolled her eyes when he talked about work, every time she'd said, "Relax, you're too sensitive," when he tried to tell her something hurt. The 10 freeway was moving, late enough that traffic had thinned. Frank took the La Cienega exit and wound through the quiet residential streets toward his house. Trees lined the blocks, old magnolias and jacarandas that bloomed purple in the spring. Porch lights glowed. A few houses still had TVs flickering through front windows. He parked in the driveway, cut the engine, and sat for another moment. This wasn't anger. Anger was hot, reactive, messy. This was something colder, cleaner, more final. This was a decision. Frank walked into his house. Their house, Tessa called it sometimes, though her name had never been on a single document. She'd moved in 3 years ago, temporarily, after her roommate's situation fell apart. 6 months, she'd said, just until she found something else. 6 months became a year. A year became 2. Now, 3. The living room was cluttered with her things. Throw pillows and patterns she'd picked out. A potted plant she never watered, so Frank did it. Magazines stacked on the coffee table. A blanket draped over the couch that smelled like her perfume. He walked through to the bedroom. More of her. Clothes draped over the chair in the corner. Her makeup scattered across the dresser he'd refinished. Books she'd started and never finished stacked on her nightstand. Frank didn't yell, didn't throw anything, didn't put his fist through a wall. He pulled his phone from his pocket, set it on the dresser, and went to the garage. Cardboard boxes. He kept them folded flat against the wall, leftovers from when he'd moved in. He grabbed 6 and brought them inside. He started with the clothes. Folded each piece. Jeans, t-shirts, dresses. The red one she'd worn to his company's holiday party last year, where she'd spent most of the night on her phone. The black one she'd bought for a friend's wedding and complained about the price of alterations. Everything went into boxes. Carefully. Methodically. He wasn't trying to damage anything. Wasn't trying to send a message through wrinkled clothes or broken items. He was simply removing her from his space. The makeup went into a separate bag. Bottles and palettes and brushes. The perfume that cost more than he made in a day. The skincare products that lined the bathroom counter. Her laptop sat on the desk in the spare bedroom she'd claimed as her workspace. Frank unplugged it, wrapped the cord, and placed it on top of a box. Books. Chargers. The yoga mat she'd used twice. The juicer she'd insisted they needed and never touched. The collection of mugs she'd accumulated, each one with some witty phrase or cute design. He worked through the night, room by room, methodical and thorough. It took hours. The physical act of dismantling 3 years felt strange. Not sad, not angry, just necessary. At 2:11 a.m., Frank sat on a couch he'd bought himself, in a living room that was slowly becoming his again, and picked up his phone. He opened his messages. Found Tessa's contact. Typed, "You laughed at my future. You don't live here anymore." He read it twice. Changed nothing. Hit send. Then he powered off his phone completely. The house was quiet, peaceful in a way it hadn't been in a long time. Frank looked around at the boxes stacked neatly by the garage door, at the spaces where her things used to be, at the home that was finally just his again. He didn't feel victorious. Didn't feel vindicated. He felt clear and tired. Frank went to bed. Tomorrow would bring consequences. Tonight, he just needed sleep. Tessa stumbled through the front door of Jenna's apartment at 1:47 a.m. She was drunk, not sloppy, but loose, giggly. The night had continued after Frank left. 2 more rounds. Dancing to bad 90s hip-hop. Jenna's roommate's friend had shown up and bought them shots. "I should get home," Tessa had finally said around 1:30, after Rachel had already left in an Uber and Brittany had disappeared with some guy she'd been texting. "Want me to drive you?" Jenna asked, already knowing the answer. "Nah, I'm good. It's like 15 minutes. The Mazda was parked 3 blocks away. Tessa walked carefully in her heels, focused on not tripping. The night air helped. Cooled her face. Made the world feel less fuzzy. She drove slowly. Deliberately. She wasn't that drunk. Just buzzed. Happy buzzed. The kind where everything felt funny and light, and tomorrow seemed very far away. The streets of Culver City were empty. She turned onto Frank Street, their street, and felt that familiar comfort of coming home. The porch light was off. That was weird. Frank always left it on for her. Maybe he was mad. Probably. He'd been weird at the bar. Sensitive. She'd have to deal with that in the morning. Tell him she was just joking. God, he took everything so seriously. Tessa parked behind his truck and walked to the front door. She pulled her keys from her purse, found the house key, and slid into the lock. It didn't turn. She tried again. Pushed harder. Wiggled it. Nothing. Frank. She knocked. Light at first. Then harder. Frank, my key's not working. Silence. She pulled out her phone. 3:27 a.m. She called him. Straight to voicemail. Frank, come on. Open the door. I can't get in. She called again. Voicemail. Again. Voicemail. Panic started cutting through the alcohol fog. She pounded on the door, not caring about the neighbors anymore. Frank, open the door. Nothing moved inside. No lights turned on. No footsteps. Tessa stepped back, her heels clicking on the concrete walkway. That's when she saw it. A piece of paper taped to the door, white against the dark wood. She pulled it down. The porch light from the neighbor's house gave enough glow to read. Your belongings are inside the garage. Pick them up tomorrow between 10 to 11. The words didn't make sense at first. She read them again. Then a third time. Her phone buzzed. A text notification from 20 minutes ago. She'd been driving. Hadn't seen it. You laughed at my future. You don't live here anymore. Tessa's stomach dropped. The alcohol warmth vanished, replaced by cold adrenaline. No, she said out loud. No, no, no. She tried the door again. Pounded harder. Screamed his name. The neighbor's dog started barking. Frank never came to the door. At 3:52 a.m., Tessa sat at her car, the engine off, staring at the house where she'd lived for 3 years. Her phone was at 7% battery. She called Frank 16 more times. All voicemail. She thought about calling Jenna. But Jenna was asleep by now. And what would she even say? Her boyfriend, ex-boyfriend, had locked her out because she'd made a joke at a bar? The night had turned cold. Tessa pulled her jacket tighter. Her heels were off now, discarded in the passenger seat. Her feet hurt. Her head hurt. The world felt like it was tilting in a direction she didn't understand. She reclined the driver's seat and closed her eyes. For the first time in 3 years, Tessa Moreno slept in her car. Morning came harsh. Sunlight through the windshield. Her neck cramped from the angle. Her mouth tasted like old tequila and regret. Tessa's phone was dead. She sat up, disoriented. Checked the clock on the dashboard. 9:47 a.m. The note had said 10 to 11. She had 13 minutes. Tessa stumbled out of the car. Her reflection in the side mirror showed yesterday's makeup smeared under her eyes. Her hair was a mess. She looked like exactly what she was, someone who'd slept in their car after a night that had gone catastrophically wrong. She walked to the front door, thought about knocking, decided against it. Instead, she went around to the side of the house where the garage entrance stood. At exactly 10 a.m., the garage door began to rise. Frank stood inside, dressed in fresh clothes. Jeans, a gray t-shirt. He looked rested, calm. Behind him, Tessa could see boxes. 6 of them, neatly stacked. Her laptop visible on top of one. Her clothes folded in another. She stared at him, stared at her life, packed into cardboard. Frank, load your stuff, he said. His voice wasn't angry. That would have been easier. It was flat, emotionless. Final. We need to talk. No, he said simply. We don't. Tessa felt tears threatening. She pushed them back. Anger rose to replace them. You can't do this. We live together. Frank stepped forward. His expression didn't change. No, you lived with me. This is insane. I made a joke. One joke. It wasn't one joke, Tessa. What? Are you that sensitive? That fragile? He didn't flinch. Didn't raise his voice. Just pulled an envelope from his back pocket and held it out. She took it. Her hand was shaking now. She opened it. Inside, documents. Formal-looking papers with legal headers. Notice of termination of permission to occupy premises. Insurance policy change notification. Mazda CX-5, policyholder, Frank Harlan. And a third page. A spreadsheet. Detailed. Months of expenses. Mortgage. Utilities. Groceries. Car insurance. All highlighted. All paid by Frank. At the bottom, a total. $43,267.89. What is this? She whispered. That's what I've paid while you lived here, Frank said. I'm not asking for it back. I'm showing you what you're about to lose. Tessa looked up. You're being cruel. I'm being done. Frank, please. Let's just talk about this. I didn't mean... You did mean it. He interrupted, his voice still terrifyingly calm. You meant at the bar. You've meant it every time you called me boring. Every time you've made me feel small in front of your friends. Every time you've told me I'm too sensitive when you hurt me. I was drunk. So am I supposed to wait until you're sober to know how you really feel? She had no answer for that. Frank gestured to the boxes. The garage closes at 11. If your stuff's still here after that, it's going to the curb. Where am I supposed to go? That's not my problem anymore. He said it without malice. Just fact. Tessa felt something crack inside her chest. Not sadness. Not yet. Just the dawning realization that she'd miscalculated. Badly. She thought Frank was safe. Steady. The kind of person who would always be there no matter what she said or did. She'd been wrong. It took 3 trips to load everything into the Mazda. Frank didn't help. He stood in the garage, watching, making sure she took everything. When she grabbed the last box, he spoke one more time. Don't come back. Tessa turned. You're really doing this? Over one night. I'm doing this because you showed me who you are, Frank said. I'm just finally believing you. At 10:58 a.m., Tessa drove away. In her rearview mirror, she watched Frank press the garage door button. The door descended slowly, cutting him off from view. She made it 2 blocks before she had to pull over. That's when the tears finally came. The Mazda's check engine light came on 3 days later. Tessa was driving to a coffee shop in Silver Lake to meet a potential client when the orange glow appeared on the dashboard, cheerful and damning. She ignored it, kept driving, made the meeting, smiled through her pitch for social media management services. The client said they'd think about it. They never called back. By day 5, the car was making a noise. Not loud, just a persistent whirring that shouldn't have been there. Tessa Googled the symptoms. The internet suggested everything from a loose belt to transmission problems. She couldn't afford a mechanic. Her checking account showed $847. Rent was due in a week at the place. She was couch surfing. Well, not exactly couch surfing. Jenna had let her stay in the second bedroom of her apartment in Palms. Just until you figure things out, Jenna had said. Jenna's roommate, a girl named Ashley who worked at a tech startup, had been less enthusiastic. Tessa could feel the tension every time she walked through the common areas. The way Ashley's eyes tracked her movements. The passive-aggressive notes appearing on the fridge about cleaning up and grocery boundaries. On day 7, Tessa got the email. Her car insurance had been canceled. Effective immediately. Policy holder's request. Frank. She called the insurance company. The representative was polite but firm. The policy is under Frank Harlan's name. He's the primary. You were listed as an additional driver. He's removed you and the vehicle from coverage. Can I start my own policy? Of course. Let me pull some quotes for you. The representative clicked away at her keyboard. Okay, based on your driving record and credit score, we're looking at about $370 per month. Tessa's throat went dry. That's insane. I understand. Your credit is affecting the rate. If you can improve that, the price would come down. Would you like to proceed with coverage? Oh, I need to think about it. She hung up, sat in Jenna's parking lot, did the math. Car payment, $380. Insurance, $370. That was $750 a month. Her freelance income last month had been $1,200. This month, so far, $300. The math didn't work. 2 days later, the bank sent a letter. Her car payment was 30 days overdue. Late fees applied. Credit reporting in 15 days. Tessa had never missed a payment. Frank had always handled it. She'd Venmo'd him her half. Well, sometimes her half. Sometimes less when money was tight. He'd never said anything. Just covered it. Now, there was no coverage. She called Rachel. Hey, can you loan me like $400? Just until this client pays me. Rachel hesitated. That pause said everything. Tess, I'm kind of tight right now. Sorry. She called Brittany. Straight to voicemail. The callback never came. She called her mother. That conversation lasted 11 minutes and ended with her mother saying, I told you not to move in with him without protection. You never listen. On day 12, Jenna sat her down. Gently, carefully, the way you'd approach a wounded animal. Ashley's uncomfortable, Jenna said. And honestly, Tess, I need my space back. I love you, but this wasn't supposed to be permanent. Where am I supposed to go? What about your mom's place? Riverside County? That's like 60 miles from anything. Jenna's expression showed sympathy, but also relief. She wanted this problem removed from her apartment. I'm sorry. You have until the end of the week. Tessa spent that night scrolling through apartment listings. Studios in neighborhoods she didn't want to live in. One-bedroom places requiring first month, last month, and security deposit. She needed at least $4,000 to move anywhere decent. She had $612 in her account. The friends who'd laughed at the bar stopped texting back. Invitations dried up. Birthday dinners happened without her. Weekend plans materialized on Instagram stories she hadn't been included in. They hadn't ostracized her deliberately. They just moved on. And Tessa, newly untethered from Frank's stability, had nothing to offer their comfortable, coupled-up social ecosystem. On day 19, the Mazda died. Actually died. She was driving on Sepulveda when the engine made a grinding noise that sounded expensive and then simply stopped. She coasted to the shoulder, hazards blinking, while trucks screamed past and rattled the frame. The tow truck cost $180. The mechanic looked at the engine and shook his head. Timing belt. Plus you've got transmission fluid leaking. We're talking $3,000, maybe $4,000 to fix this right. How much to fix it wrong? The mechanic laughed. It wasn't a kind sound. Lady, you can't half-fix this. It's done. Tessa sold the car 2 days later. Took it to a dealer who bought broken vehicles. They offered her $1,200. She took it. Didn't have a choice. Without a car, Los Angeles became a maze of bus routes and expensive Ubers. Meetings became difficult. Clients became impossible. Her freelance work required mobility. Needed her to be able to show up at cafes and offices and co-working spaces across the sprawling city. Without that mobility, the work evaporated. By the end of the month, Tessa had moved back to her mother's house in Riverside County. A bedroom that still had her high school posters on the walls. A twin bed. A single window that looked out at a parking lot. Her mother didn't gloat. Didn't say, "I told you so." But the disappointment lived in the silence between them, heavy and unignorable. Tessa got a job at a retail store in a strip mall. $9 an hour. For days a week. She took the bus. It took 40 minutes each way. She came home smelling like candles and forced customer service miles. At night, she lay in her childhood bed and scrolled through Instagram. Saw Jenna at a new restaurant. Rachel at a beach house in Malibu. Brittany celebrating a work promotion. And just once, she saw a photo that made her stomach drop. Frank, at a brewery, smiling, genuinely smiling. A woman next to him, partially visible. The caption from his friend, "Good to see you happy again, man." Tessa didn't sleep that night. She thought about texting him, apologizing, explaining, begging. But she knew, deep down, past the pride and the anger and the justifications. She knew it was over, had been over the moment she laughed. 2 months felt like 2 years. Time stretched when you were falling. Frank's life, meanwhile, contracted back into something manageable. Better than manageable. Good. The house was quiet. That took getting used to. The first week felt strange. Empty spaces where her things had been. No random mess appearing overnight. No half-finished coffee cups abandoned on tables. No arguments about whether the thermostat was set too high. Just quiet. Frank settled into it like a man lowering himself into a hot bath. Gradual. Relieving. Necessary. Work kept him busy. A new project in Long Beach. A renovation in Pasadena. He coordinated deliveries, managed timelines, solved problems. The job was steady. Reliable. It paid well and asked nothing of him except competence. After work, he went to the gym. Something he'd stopped doing when Tessa moved in. She complained about him being gone too much. So he'd stopped. Now he went 4 times a week. Felt his body remember what it could do. Strength returning. Clarity following. He fixed things around the house. Small projects he'd been putting off. Rehung a door that stuck. Replaced the weather stripping. Painted the guest bedroom a clean, neutral gray. The house was becoming his again. Fully. Completely. Friends reached out. Brady, a site manager he'd worked with for years, texted, "Heard you're single again. Brewery this weekend?" Frank went. Met Brady and 2 other guys from work. They drank IPAs and talked about nothing important. sports, work gossip, someone's terrible Tinder date. Easy conversation that asked nothing heavy of anyone. "You doing all right?" Brady asked eventually, in that careful way men asked each other emotional questions. "Yeah," Frank said, and meant it. "Breakups are rough." This one wasn't. Brady nodded, didn't press, ordered another round. At the bar, a woman smiled at Frank. She had kind eyes and wore a flannel shirt. They talked for 20 minutes. Her name was Jordan. She was an architect. They exchanged numbers. She texted him first the next day. Frank didn't rush into anything. Kept it casual. Coffee, a walk, dinner at a Thai place in Culver City. Jordan was easy to be around. She laughed at his jokes, asked about his work with genuine interest, never made him feel small. On their third date, she said, "You seem really grounded, like you know who you are." Frank considered that. "I'm still figuring it out. But yeah, I know what I won't tolerate anymore." "That's the important part," Jordan said. They saw each other regularly after that. Nothing too serious. No pressure. Just two people enjoying each other's company without games or cruelty or contempt. Meanwhile, Frank's phone stayed silent. Tessa had never texted, never called. For the first few weeks, he'd wondered if she would. Prepared himself for the apology or the anger or the negotiation. But nothing came. Good, he thought. Clean break. Better that way. Until the night she showed up at his door. It was a Tuesday. 8:30 p.m. Frank had just finished dinner. Leftover pasta and a beer. He was reading on the couch, some thriller about a heist gone wrong, when the doorbell rang. He wasn't expecting anyone. Jordan was at a work thing. Brady was out of town. Frank opened the door. Tessa stood on his porch. She looked different, thinner, tired. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail. She wore jeans and a sweatshirt he didn't recognize. No makeup, dark circles under her eyes. She looked at him. He looked at her. Neither spoke for a moment. "Hi," she finally said. Her voice was small, careful. "Tessa, can we talk?" Frank's hand remained on the door frame. His body blocked the entrance. "About what?" "About us. About what happened." "There's no us," he said. "And what happened is already finished." "Frank, please." She shifted her weight. "Look down. I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But can we just talk? 5 minutes." He studied her. Saw genuine desperation. It didn't move him the way she probably hoped it would. "No," he said. "I didn't know it would fall apart like this." Her words came faster now. Urgent. Everything just, "My car broke down. I lost work. I had to move back with my mom. I can't." She stopped. Took a breath. "I didn't know you were holding so much together." "You thought I'd stay no matter what," Frank said. "That was the mistake. I was drunk. I was stupid. It was one night. It was every night, Tessa." "You just said the quiet part loud that time." She was crying now. Real tears. Not the pretty crying of movies. Messy. Red-faced. Desperate. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Can't we try again? I'll do counseling. I'll be better. I'll respect you, I promise." Frank felt nothing. That was the surprising part. No anger. No satisfaction. Not even pity. Just a blank space where affection used to live. "You laughed when I offered commitment," he said quietly. "I won't comfort you now," that life laughed back. "That's cruel. That's honest." Tessa reached out like she might touch his arm. He stepped back. The message was clear. "Please," she whispered. "I have nowhere else to go. That's not my problem anymore." "Frank." "Goodbye, Tessa." He closed the door, stood there on the other side and listened. Heard her sob once, twice, then footsteps, then silence. Frank walked back to his couch, picked up his book, found his place. Read 3 more pages before he realized he wasn't processing the words. He set the book down, stared at the wall. No regret touched him, no second-guessing. She'd come seeking rescue. Found a door, closed to her instead. That's what happened when you burn a bridge. Sometimes you needed to cross back and discover there was nothing but air where the structure used to stand. Frank finished his beer, went to bed, slept better than he had in months. Life continued. The mechanics of daily existence that everyone navigates. Work, meals, sleep, small decisions, tiny victories, incremental forward motion. Tessa disappeared back into whatever life she was building in Riverside County. Frank occasionally wondered how she was doing in the abstract way you might wonder about a stranger from a news story. concerned but not connected, sympathetic from a distance but unwilling to bridge the gap. Jordan became more present. They moved from casual to serious somewhere around month 3. She met his friends. He met hers. They talked about real things, future things, plans that included each other without demands or ultimatums. "You're different from the guys I usually date," Jordan said one night. They were at his house. She made dinner. He'd done the dishes. They were sitting on the back patio, watching the sunset orange and pink behind the neighbor's roof. "How so?" Frank asked. "You mean what you say. If you're going to show up, you show up. If you're done, you're done. There's no game playing. I got tired of games." "I like it," she said. "It's refreshing. I know where I stand." Frank nodded. "That's all anyone really wants. Honesty and respect." Sounds simple when you say it like that. It is simple. People just make it complicated. 3 months later, Brady's girlfriend threw a party. Summer barbecue at her place in Manhattan Beach. Burgers and beer and volleyball in the yard. Frank brought Jordan. She wore a sundress and laughed at Brady's terrible jokes and fit seamlessly into the group. Late in the afternoon, someone mentioned weddings. Brady's girlfriend had just gotten engaged. The ring was new enough that people were still asking to see it. "So when's Frank gonna lock it down?" someone joked. The words hung in the air. An echo from a different night. A different bar. A different person. Jordan looked at Frank. He looked back. She raised an eyebrow slightly, amused but not concerned. Frank smiled. Genuinely. Only with someone who wouldn't laugh at it. The moment passed. The conversation moved on. No one knew the weight of those words except Frank. That night, driving home, Jordan asked, "What was that about?" "At the party." Frank told her. Not everything, but enough. About Tessa. About the bar. About the decision he'd made and followed through. Jordan listened. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. "I'm glad you did that," she finally said. Yeah. It means you know your worth." Too many people stay in situations that hurt them because leaving feels harder than staying. "It wasn't hard," Frank admitted. "That's what surprised me. Once I decided, it was easy. That's how you know it was the right choice." They drove the rest of the way in comfortable silence. 6 months after the night at the bar, Frank's life had reformed around him like a bone that healed stronger than before. The house was fully his. The mortgage paid on time. The yard cleaned up. Small improvements everywhere that accumulated into something that felt like pride. He was sleeping well, eating better, going to the gym, saving money, seeing friends, dating someone who treated him with baseline respect and affection. Nothing dramatic, nothing cinematic, just a steady, sustainable good life built on the foundation of knowing what he wouldn't tolerate. Tessa's trajectory was different. She posted occasionally on Instagram. Frank had unfollowed her, but heard through mutual acquaintances. She was still in Riverside County, still working retail. Her posts showed a woman trying to project normalcy, while everything behind the scenes had fundamentally changed. No more expensive restaurants. No more weekend trips. No more photos with a friend group that had moved on without her. Just solo shots with captions about new chapters and finding myself, and other phrases that signaled struggle dressed up as growth. Frank didn't gloat, didn't share his success as contrast to her fall. He simply lived his life and let her live hers, two paths that had diverged and would never cross again. One evening, sitting on his back patio with Jordan, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of fire and gold, Frank felt something settle in his chest. Peace, not the absence of conflict, but the presence of clarity, the knowledge that he'd protected himself, that he'd drawn a line and meant it, that he'd walked away from disrespect and found something better on the other side. Jordan leaned her head on his shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" "How quiet it is," Frank said. "Quiet's good." "Yeah," he agreed. "It is." Somewhere across Los Angeles, in a bedroom in Riverside County, Tessa lay awake and thought about timing belts and credit scores and the sound of Frank's door closing. She thought about the moment she'd left, the moment she'd miscalculated, the moment she'd lost access to stability she hadn't known she was standing on. She wondered if he ever thought about her. He didn't. Not really. Frank Harlan had moved on. Completely. Finally. Without malice or victory or satisfaction. He'd simply stopped protecting her from the consequences of her own behavior. And that was enough. The seasons changed. Summer's heat gave way to the cooler clarity of fall. Los Angeles didn't do dramatic seasonal shifts, but the light changed. Softer, more golden. The air carried less weight. Frank's life continued its forward momentum. Work picked up. A major project in downtown LA required his full attention for 2 months. He managed the logistics for a 12-story renovation. Complex, demanding, the kind of project that required precision and adaptability and the ability to solve problems before they became catastrophes. He was good at it, had always been good at it. But now, without the constant background noise of a relationship that drained him, he was better, sharper, more present. His boss noticed. "You've been on fire lately," she said one afternoon, reviewing the timeline Frank had optimized. "Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." "Just focused," Frank said. "Well, it shows." She closed her laptop. "I'm putting you on the Pasadena project when this wraps. It's a big one. More responsibility, more money. Appreciate it. You've earned it." Frank drove home that evening feeling something that had been absent for years. Professional satisfaction without domestic tension. Success that didn't need to be downplayed or apologized for or made smaller to fit someone else's comfort level. Jordan was waiting at his house when he arrived. She had a key now, a drawer in his dresser, a toothbrush in his bathroom. Nothing rushed, just natural progression. "Good day," she asked, pulling garlic bread from the oven. "Really good." He told her about the promotion, the new project, the raise that came with it. Jordan hugged him, genuinely happy. "That's amazing. I'm proud of you." Simple words, but they landed differently because they came without resentment or competition or the need to diminish his achievement. "Feels good," Frank admitted. They ate dinner, talked about their days, made plans for the weekend. Normal couple things that felt revolutionary in their lack of conflict. Later, lying in bed, Jordan asked, "Do you ever regret how things ended with your ex?" Frank thought about it, really considered the question. "No, not even a little. Not even a little," he confirmed. "I regret the time I wasted, but not ending it. That's very certain. When you get disrespected that publicly, that deliberately, it clarifies things." Jordan was quiet for a moment. "She reached out to you, didn't she? A while back. She came here. 2 months ago. You never mentioned it. Didn't seem relevant. What did she want? Another chance? Or help? Hard to tell. And you said, no." Frank turned to look at Jordan. "I told her I wouldn't comfort her for consequences she created." Jordan studied his face. "That's pretty harsh. That's boundaries." She nodded slowly. "I respect that. It's just, most people struggle with boundaries that firm. Most people stay in situations that hurt them because leaving feels harder. I got tired of hurting. I'm glad you did." Jordan kissed him softly. For selfish reasons. They fell asleep tangled together, two people building something that felt solid and real. Winter arrived. Still mild by most standards, but Los Angeles winter nonetheless. Rain fell occasionally. Temperatures dropped into the 50s at night. People wore jackets and acted like it was Arctic tundra. Frank's routine stayed consistent. Work, gym, time with Jordan, time with friends, small maintenance projects around the house, reading, cooking, simple pleasures that accumulated into contentment. His phone rang one Tuesday afternoon. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. "Hello. Frank? It's Jenna." Silence. Tessa's friend. One of the people who'd laughed that night at the bar. "What do you want, Jenna? Is Tessa with you?" "No. Why would she be? I thought maybe you guys had talked. Worked things out." "We haven't. We won't." "Okay." Jenna paused. "How have you been?" "Good. Really good." That's great." She didn't sound like she thought it was great. "Listen, I wanted to say I'm sorry. For that night. I should have said something when Tessa." "It's done, Jenna. I appreciate the apology, but I've moved on." "Right. Of course." Another pause. "If you talk to Tessa." "I won't. But if you do." "I won't." Frank repeated, firmer this time. "Is there something else?" No, that's it. Take care, Frank." She hung up. Frank set his phone down and returned to the spreadsheet he'd been working on. The interruption lasted less than 3 minutes. He forgot about it before the end of the day. Spring came. The jacaranda trees bloomed purple along his street. The house needed exterior painting. Frank spent 3 weekends doing it himself. Prep work, primer, 2 coats of sage green that made the craftsman architecture pop. Jordan helped. They worked side by side, rollers in hand, music playing from a speaker in the yard. Neighbors walked by and complimented their progress. One older woman brought them lemonade. "You two make a good team," she said, smiling at them from the sidewalk. Frank looked at Jordan, paint specks on her cheek. She grinned back at him. "Yeah," he agreed. "We do." The painting finished, the house looked renewed. Fresh, cared for, like something loved rather than just occupied. Brady came over to see it. Brought his fiancée. They stood in the front yard, admiring the work. "Looks professional," Brady said. "Saved $2,000 doing it myself." Time well spent. Brady glanced at Jordan, who was inside making drinks. "She's good for you, man." "I know. You ever gonna make it official?" Frank smiled. "Maybe. When the time's right. Don't wait too long." "I won't." Life settled into rhythms. Good rhythms. Predictable, but not boring. Stable, but not stagnant. Frank felt like he'd finally stepped into a version of himself that fit properly. He was 35 now. Older. Maybe wiser. Definitely clearer about what he wanted and what he wouldn't accept. The memory of Tessa faded naturally. Not erased. Just filed away. A chapter closed. A lesson learned. A reminder that you teach people how to treat you by what you tolerate. One evening in May, Frank and Jordan sat at a bar. Different bar. Different neighborhood. Different energy. They were celebrating Jordan's promotion. She'd made partner at her architecture firm. Big deal. Deserved. The place was packed. Good wine. Good food. Good company. Someone at the table asked about weddings. Jordan's colleague had just gotten engaged. Rings shown. Congratulations exchanged. "You two next?" the colleague asked, gesturing at Frank and Jordan. Frank felt Jordan tense slightly. Not nervously, just attentive, waiting to see how he'd handle the question. He looked at her. She looked back. Small smile. Kind eyes. No pressure. Just curiosity. "Maybe," Frank said, "when we're both ready." Jordan's smile widened. She squeezed his hand under the table. The colleague laughed. "That's the most honest answer I've ever heard." The conversation moved on. Frank and Jordan stayed, quiet for a moment, just holding hands while the noise of the restaurant swirled around them. "Thank you," Jordan said quietly. "For what?" "For not freaking out at the wedding question. For being honest. For being you. That's easy with you." "Good." She leaned in and kissed his cheek. "Keep it that way." They stayed at the restaurant until late. Laughed with Jordan's coworkers. Celebrated her success. Drove home, singing badly to 80s rock on the radio. That night, lying in the dark, Frank thought about the trajectory of his life. How one decision, one moment of clarity and action, had changed everything. He'd stopped protecting someone from consequences. He'd started protecting himself instead. The results spoke for themselves. Somewhere in Riverside County, Tessa's life continued on its different trajectory. Frank didn't know the details. Didn't ask. Didn't care to know. He hoped, in the abstract way you might hope for anyone, that she was learning, growing, becoming someone who treated people better. But her growth wasn't his responsibility. His responsibility was to himself, to his peace, to the life he was building with someone who respected him. And that life was good, really good. Frank Harlan slept well that night, in his house, next to a woman who valued him, in a city that offered endless second chances if you were brave enough to walk away from first mistakes. The chapter closed. The story continued. And the ending this time was kind.